Hey guys, hope all is well. So in this video, we'll be covering the fullbacks for Super Rugby Pacific, and we'll be ranking them in terms of our top five. So again, of course, to my right, we do have the likes of the Kiwi lads. So first of all, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, Tim. I'm still indecisive though, and to be honest, with the fullbacks, wingers was tricky. The fullbacks are a little bit more challenging because there's very different types of fullbacks we've seen in Super Rugby Pacific, but overall, I think I've got maybe four of them right in terms of the top five. There's a couple others that could have popped their way in there, of
Yeah.
course, but yeah, the hardest part is ranking them, and of course, we probably have some differences.
That's for sure. That's for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a similar kind of we have similar names, but it's just in terms of the positioning, that's obviously where
Mm.
there'll be a difference there. But yeah, before we get into this, guys, obviously make sure to like the video. We'd greatly appreciate that. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and yeah, just comment below. Obviously, letting us know your top five in terms of fullbacks for this year's Super Pacific, and yeah, obviously check out the Kiwi lads. I'll put a link in the description below. But yeah, let's just dive straight into this. So for you, of course, who have you gone with for your number five in terms of fullbacks for this year?
Well, at number five, this is a man that I think could easily be maybe three or four as well, depending on how you rank them and depending on what you see as, I guess, the statistical breakdown compared to some of those other guys within the top five. I think I've made the right choice though, and that is pun intended, as it is Tom Wright as my number five. 355 metres carried. He's also scored himself 3 tries, been in some very good form over the last couple of weeks, coming from more of a winger in terms of last year's Super Rugby Pacific, now transitioning to 15. I think he's been doing pretty well, so yeah, I'll go with Tom Wright as my number five.
Yeah, that's a solid shout, and that's exactly the reason why I also have him. I'm in my five spot as well. It's because like you said, he's had 3 tries on the board, 1 try assist, and he's really been able to kind of do that within the past few weeks. Like I wouldn't normally put him within my top five because I think there was other players I was considering ahead of him. If I was doing this 2 weeks ago, then I would have maybe not put him within my top five. But recently, he's just been really good for the Brumbies, and it's kind of allowed them to kind of just be in some good, decent form. Because again, they've got those good wins against the Highlanders away, as well as that big win against Mono Pacifico. So, and I think he's been a big part of that. So that's the reason why I kind of put him in the number five spots. But again, it's kind of a mix and match here. So, like you said, it's obviously a bit of a challenging one. He could have even gone higher if he wanted to, but I think number five is where I think that's right. But again, moving on towards the number four spot, I'll go first here with this one. I've gone with the likes of Ruben Love here, and this is a tough one because again, I would have gone with I was thinking to go with him higher, but the thing is that like Ruben Love, he's missed one game, and then recently he hasn't I'd say like the first 3 games he was like incredible, and then like he's kind of like dropped down in form actually in the last two. It's kind of like the reverse of what's happened with Tom Wright, I would say, just because again, Ruben Love, I mean, he was incredible in that game against the Blues. I mean, he had like 3 try assists alone just in that game. And then he had like, I think 1 try assist beforehand, and he scored 2 tries as well. So he's been very impressive in terms from a stats point of view. And yeah, he's really just opened up the Hurricanes, because you have to remember that the Hurricanes normally, like they've had a lot of changes this year, and they have a very young squad now, like a very young squad, particularly in that back line. And he's been really kind of like the, I guess, the quarterback in it, I guess, in a lot of these plays now, kind of setting up the plays for other players. So I've been really impressed by him, and he's someone who I definitely think has the potential to even get an All Blacks call up this year. Again, a lot has to go his way because he has to be a lot more consistent, but definitely a player to keep in mind in terms of that selection process. But yeah, well, I mean, what about yourself?
Well, at number four, Tim, I've gone with a guy who has got himself 2 tries throughout this Super Rugby Pacific season. He's also had 4 try assists, made 16 tackles, which, to be honest, for a fullback is actually relatively high because we haven't seen a huge amount of tackling stats really for fullbacks this year. I think Danny Tawala's leading with about 20. That's because at times Moana Pacifica, the
Yeah,
backline doesn't exist and he has
exactly.
to kind of rely on his tackling. But the man that I've gone with at number four plays for the Hurricanes. It's Ruben Love
There
as
you
my
go.
number four rank. I'm a little bit similar to you. I feel like he's been extremely strong in the games that we've seen him in. But when you look at the stat to stat in terms of some of those other guys who have played more matches, like if Ruben Love played rather than Harry Godfrey, I think that he would be top two. And
Yeah.
like, to be honest, because of the way that Rebels game went with the Hurricanes, maybe he could have even got himself 2 more tries, maybe a couple try assists, slowly made his way up those rankings a little bit more. But yeah, Ruben Love is at my number 4.
Yeah, fair enough. And yeah, he had a great game, by the way. Forgot to mention him, but he's someone that I would have definitely considered. But again, he's only had
He's
very
only
few
had
minutes
one
on the
match
board, so
too, you know.
yeah, exactly. So you can't really consider him. But again, going off towards number 3, then who have you selected there?
Well, I've gone with a man who predominantly has played fullback throughout this season, although he has transitioned out to that right wing in one of the matches. And in fact,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was the left wing, I believe, if I'm not wrong. And he actually did relatively decently, got himself a try, got himself the 5 defender beaten in that game. But I'm going with a man on a side that's slightly been struggling per se, but then at other times have been extremely well. And he's been one of the shining lights for them. So I'm going with Andrew Callaway as my number 3. He's got himself 3 tries. He's had 348 metres carried so far throughout the season, 20 defenders beaten. So that's starting to get a little bit
yeah,
up there in terms of those stats. And that's actually not including the 5 defenders beaten he beat out on the wing. So he's
yeah.
got that versatility as well. And that's why I've put him at number 3.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because I definitely have it higher in my kind of rankings from my point of view. But again, for this, I think there's like 3 obvious names there, and they can go either way. But
Mm-hmm.
I've gone for number 3, Jacob Matahuki Nemkins here at number 3. He's just
Okay.
one player who I think has really stood out this year. And again, you have to remember that he's a new signing, so he's really been able to kind of just transition easily into this Highlanders kind of back line and he's looked really good. Like he's got 4 tries, 2 try assists, like 7 offloads. Like he's been able to kind of capitalize on that position really well. Because again, if you remember, he was obviously at the Blues and he wasn't getting as much minutes as you'd like. But again, as a Blues fan, I knew he was talented. It's just that it's one of those where at
Mm.
times with the likes of Bowden Barrett there or Stephen Parafeta or now Zarn Sullivan. So it's just one of those like where again there was always a player in his way. So I'm actually happy that he's doing well at the Highlanders. But yeah, he's a player who I think really has stood up for them so far. Looks really impressive. And yeah, like I said, that backline with Nareki as well as Tafata Nawai, it looks really balanced. So yeah, that's the reason why I've gone with him at number 3. Again, I would have maybe put him higher if the Highlanders were in a better position, but I just think that, overall he's been really complete so far this season. So that's why he's in my number 3 spots. Yeah, so I guess going on then towards my number 2 for this, I've gone with the likes of Sean Stevenson in this position. So it's a big call because there's really 2 I could have gone with here, but I've gone with Sean Stevenson. He's got 2 tries to his name, 4 try assists, which is probably the key one, which I was really impressed by. He's at 389 meters gains. He's at 8 offloads. He's been really just all over the place, really, for the Chiefs. And like you said, of course, he's a player who's kind of been fullback, but at times has played winger as well because he got one of his tries against the Reds, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, in that 14 spot. So it's one of those like where yes, he's kind of had to shift a few again, but he's just part of an amazing back line with the likes of Nana Satiro himself, and again that 14 kind of interchanges, but still it's pretty good to what they have in terms of that kind of back line there. And again, the Chiefs have been in a really good position, I say, so far this year, and he's been a big part of that because his combination that that 15-10 combination with him and McKenzie is done very well so far, and that's something we could see eventually later on in this season, not in the club level but international. So there's an opportunity there to kind of I guess make the step up in that case, and I think he's done that so far. So that's kind of the reason why I put on number 2 spots. And again, the Chiefs have had a brilliant season, and he's really been a big part of that. Again, at times you could say he could. I kind of want him to score a lot more tries because he's one of those players where, in a weird way, he's unselfish in a fullback. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, by the way, but it's also at the same time you want your fullback to kind of take those opportunities. So if he can do that a lot more often, then I would not be surprised if he has like the most kind of like, I don't know, if he gets like 10 and 10, maybe there's a possibility he can get like 10 and 10 if that was a way, if there's ever a player to do it, it's him. But for yourself then, who have you gone for your number 2 spot?
I've also got Sean Stevenson as
Oh,
my
okay,
number
okay.
2. I'll be honest, while sitting here looking at some of the statistics in terms of comparing him to a couple of the other players, maybe I've put him a little bit too high. But I think, like you mentioned, those 4 try assists really help him out in that regard. Also, the fact that he's had 7 offloads along the way, so getting that ball, continuing moving it,
Yeah,
and then that just allows the Chiefs to continue their attacking prowess. He's had 337 metres carried, so not exactly a bad amount of numbers, and I believe
yeah,
that is only from fullback, not including the game that he did play out on the wing. He's He's also had a try to his name. He's got a turnover in the breakdown. He didn't actually make any tackles in that first game I saw up against the Crusaders or in the second match. So, in a way, you could also argue that because the Chiefs have been so strong this year, Sean Stevenson hasn't really had to step up like some of the other fullbacks that we've got in our top five. But yeah, I think he's still a very solid option and definitely an AB's contention.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. But yeah, I'll let you do it, man. What is your number one pick in terms of who's been the best fullback so far within Super Pacific?
Well, I think you probably know because I think we've got a very similar top five
Yeah, we do.
in that
We do.
regard. But I have gone with Jacob Ratamaitavuki Nepkins as my number one fullback so far. Now, that can obviously change. They could have a terrible game this weekend, a couple of these guys, and we might say they're not even in the top five anymore. But at this stage of the competition, I think he's been the most consistent fullback that we've seen in this competition. 4 tries to his name, 357 metres carried. He's also had 21 defenders beaten, 3 clean breaks, 7 offloads, the list goes on. Got a couple turnovers, 1, and had a try assist alongside it as well. So definitely a player to watch out for. The Highlanders, like you said, they're blessed with the fact they've got Timothy Tavatavanawa as well as Jonah Nareki. Sam Gilbert, he was actually one of my top picks in terms of centres for the competition. And I think that they're a side that are looking very strong at the moment. And one of those reasons is that consistent, safe option at number 15 of Jacob Ratamaitavuki Nepkins. So easily, this whole top 5, I think that it's honestly just down to preference. The fact that we've got the exact same 5, it just depends on what type of player people enjoy seeing. Because I could honestly say that Tom Wright as the number 5 could be in that top 2, depending on what you're looking for in a fullback. He's had the most running meters out of any player, with the exception of my pick, Jacob Ratamaitavuki Nepkins, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can take into consideration. We're going to probably do a few honourable mentions afterwards for other players who we haven't put in that top 5. Of course, we've still got one who's been very good with kicking in the competition, but he missed out because he didn't have those same stats.
Exactly. But I mean, you know my number one here. I've gone with the likes of Andrew Kellaway. I just think he's been sensational this year for the Rebels. Again, when you're obviously comparing the teams, obviously out of all the teams listed here, the Rebels obviously aren't in the best position compared to the other teams from the other fullbacks we've listed. But I think at the same time, it kind of demonstrates that he's been really the standout player for that side. And he's, like you said, he's had 4 tries, 1 try assist. He's had 25 defenders beaten. He's had 389 meters gained. So that's the exact same amount as Sean Stevenson as well. So it's just one of those where you can tell he's been really a part of the games that he's played in. Again, the only one that he wasn't able to kind of capitalize on was really that first game against the Brumbies, because obviously they went scoreless, but in terms of tries. But I think he was still good in that game, and he's able to kind of continue that consistency over the following games that he's been playing so far. So yeah, I've been really impressed by him. He's just a player that the Rebels will miss because, of course, he is going to be leaving to the Waratahs the following season. But he's really been a good player for them, and I just think he's someone that, he's always been, I guess, it comes down towards consistency, and he, I think, is the definition of that. Out of all the Australian ringers I've seen so far, he's fullbacks I've seen so far, he's definitely the one that's kind of stood out. Because again, when Joe Schmidt is looking at kind of back three, he has to be a part of it. And I think that's just the reason why I've kind of gone with him in the number 1 spot in terms of the 15s so far this season. But
well, Tim, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Your reasoning behind putting Highlanders fullback, Jacob Ratamaitavuki Nepkins, at number 3, I believe the main reason was because his side aren't doing that well on the table.
No,
the Rebels sitting a little bit lower on the table than the Highlanders. So
the reason why I've gone with him is, I explained it where you have a back three you have brilliant players in your back three with Nareki as well as Tavatanawa. So you have a kind of you're able to kind of leverage that more than what Kellaway can do, because I don't believe his back three is as good as that. So I think he's been able to stand out more in that position as a 15 and kind of dictate the play a lot more, because I've seen more running game from him compared to the likes of Jacob Ratamaitavuki Nepkins. So it's one of those where I just think he's been able to kind of just I just go full throttle at it and just have a ton of freedom really, and that's kind of what I like within a fullback, to be fair. Because I mean, Will Jordan, obviously we've seen in the previous years, the way he kind of just goes at it is just he gets a ton of space, he just beats the defenders, he just finds the gap within those spaces, and I think Andrew Kellaway has been, out of all the players we've listed so far, he's been the closest representation of what Will Jordan does on a regular for the Crusaders. So that's kind of the reason why I've selected him at number one, because he just kind of reminds me of that way. And again, it's very effective because, I mean, I'm not saying that, Andrew Kellaway is better than Will Jordan, but he's definitely, I can see kind of a comparison between the two and kind of how they kind of go at it so far. But yeah, that's kind of the reason why I've gone with number one. But again, like you said, in terms of the honorable mentions, there are a few players that we kind of obviously just missed out. But yeah, just name a few, obviously, from your front that you thought could have made the conversation, but yeah, just didn't get in.
Well, that depends on how many you want. I've probably got 6, to be honest, but I won't go with all of them. First of all, if he played more games, I think Eliza Drouasisi would definitely be in the conversation, seeing as he has 2 less games than anyone else in terms of that top 5. So he's only just come in, but he's already got 300 running metres to his name, 7 defenders beaten. So he definitely would have been a good shout. Someone else for the Western Force, Max Burry, I think has actually been very strong throughout this season. Had over the 300 metres carried. He's also just been very consistent for a side that has had inconsistency. So, yeah, hopefully he does continue playing well. Che Fiaki, I think, for the Crusaders in a struggling season, hasn't looked too bad at the moment, alongside Zahn Sullivan for the Blues. He hasn't had a lot of running metres, but his kicking game, in terms of those 50-22s, offers something very different compared to a lot of these other fullbacks that we have been listing. So I thought I'd better give him the honourable mention. And then also, I think that Jock Campbell, in the short amount of time that he's had, has been looking very strong for the Reds, alongside Danny Tuala of Moana Pacifica.
Yeah, so for me, out of the bunch you just said there, the 3 I was definitely considering was Funake, Danny Tuala, and you just said him, Jock Campbell. Yeah, those are the 3 I was definitely considering. Like Zahn Sullivan, I would love to put him in the conversation, but I know he's had better starts to a season than what he's had so far. And again, obviously with the whole injury, he's kind of not going to be in the thinking now, I guess, for the remainder of the season. So it's one of those where it's a bit unfortunate from his point of view, but again, just looking at the other players that you mentioned there, I think all of them have done brilliant so far. But just it comes down towards who's been able to make the bigger impact in their side and has kind of elevated their side to the next level in terms of that position. I just think the top 5 we selected, because again, we've selected the same 5 top players, so we can kind of mix and match there. But at least we have a kind of an agreement that those 5 have been the kind of players that have stood out for their sides overall. But yeah, guys, we're gonna leave it there. Hope you guys obviously enjoyed this video. Make sure obviously to check out the Kiwi lads. Like I said, again, make sure to obviously like, subscribe, and comment below. Let us know your top 5 in terms of Super Rugby Pacific fullbacks. But yeah, besides that, we'll see you guys next time.